Hey guys, it's Tyler with TJX Survival. I'm here with Matt Graham, and we're going to talk about the characteristics that you should look for in a survival knife. So stay tuned. Okay guys, the question I hate the most and the one I'm going to try to endeavor to answer right now is, what is the ultimate survival knife? Instead of saying what's the ultimate survival knife, maybe I would suggest you say, what should I look for in a knife for survival? Okay,
Yeah,
so I'm going to ask Matt that question.
Yeah.
What do we look for in a knife?
There's a lot of different things you want to look for in a good knife. You know, if you have a smaller knife, like these are actually knives that I designed called the Canyon Carver. And honestly, I think a lot of people could design a pretty decent knife. The key with, in my opinion, a good knife needs to have a good sheath combination that you're going to actually want to carry it, unless you're carrying, say, a pocket knife or something. But the advantage to having a straight knife is that you can really put it through a lot more abuse than a pocket knife will take, even the nicest
It's like a
ones
fixed
today.
blade over a folder.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. You know, because a knife like this, you can beat on the back of it, you know, sides, front, but it's still very
Don't
small.
worry about it collapsing on your
very
fingers.
very lightweight. You know, versus, you know, say your typical, you know, Swiss Army knife right here. I mean, this is awesome because you have all these options. Of course, you know, you got your screwdriver, your
Make Boy Scouts
little
happy.
knick-nadgets, is that a word?
It is now.
Okay, so you got your little knick-nadgets, but the thing is, for a very strong person, if they try to do bushcraft with this, they're going to snap that blade right off.
Yeah.
So that's really important to understand, that pocket knives are cool and they're good for just carrying on day hikes and stuff.
Spread your peanut butter.
And spread your peanut butter, do some very light work, but for heavy work, it is best to have a fixed blade. And with these guys, they're nice because it's a very lightweight knife, and with this sheath design,
I was gonna say, what I like is your sheath design, because it's not scout and it's not vertical.
exactly.
It's like a draw.
So what that means is it's not going to bounce around on your waist, and that's really important to me, because when I've spent a lot of time in the bush, I like to move fast, and if I have a sheath that's going to either flap around or get in the way,
You can't run.
That's no good. And you know, that brings me to a bigger knife. You know, people say, well, why do you carry such a big knife? People look at
What
that.
would be the skill sets for these? Because I know what I would consider my answers to why I want a little one and a big one. But let's clarify that for the viewers. Why two?
Yeah. So a big knife is going to allow you to do bigger tasks, essentially. It's going to act as a small machete, but you can still do your carving task. And that's actually going to save a lot of energy. If you're trying to build a shelter, you're carving poles with a little knife, that's not going to work. So
Make your shelter with your, yeah.
yeah, it's a big time suck, you know, and some people are really good with batoning, and they might argue the point where you could say, well, you could just baton a little knife, but that
Or you can bring a big one.
you can't, exactly. Or you can use something that's going to burn less calories, and that chopping motion is a lot easier than that muscling through a piece of wood. So, you know, you have a big knife, and this one, in my opinion, is kind of an all-around knife, so you potentially could do a lot of smaller tasks with it, and has a wide front so you can choke up on it. You can still get in there, you can skin with it and do smaller tasks on the end as well.
One thing I like about this is it's a little bit front heavy. So as you're chopping, it's got a nice flow to it, like a kukri,
Yeah.
or golak or something.
Yeah.
And that for me at least, that's something I really like, because that way you can process that medium wrist size firewood quickly without having to. It's big enough you can't really break it, and it's small enough you don't really need a hatchet.
Yep.
And that's what the majority of fire really should be made from.
Yeah.
And I don't know, for me, I mean, this is the one I'm carrying right now. I have a chopper and I have a small one. That's
Yeah.
my chopper, and
It's
it's
very similar.
a lot more weight because it's thicker, but it's still going to chop right close to the same. This is a little hybrid. A friend of mine made that. He took one knife and made the handle for me, so it's kind of a unique thing.
Yeah, I like that. And you know, we look at the sheaths. You know, so this is a pretty unique sheath that I've been making.
I've never seen
These
anything
for
like
quite a
it,
while.
and I
Yeah.
really like that you can drop it in a belt or
Right.
slip it in something.
Yeah, you tuck it behind your waist, and it's kind of the same thing. In terms of, like, I like to move quick, and I don't want a knife bouncing around. So this knife, even though it's pretty big, it weighs less than a pound, has a sheath design. You can still run with it. It's called a primitive bush knife. So that's
I think it's really smart. Really smart.
that's pretty unique design. And so I think for a knife, you kind of want to consider, like, what are you going to do with it? You know, maybe just a small knife is all you need for a day trip or an ultralight trip of some kind.
Well, and either two, you know, if you're going to do if you're going to do a big thing, a big knife may be all you need. But it's nice. I think people get really hung up on what do you need. And I would like to say, well, if you're sitting here thinking about it, how about what do you want?
Right.
You know, why
Yeah.
why get so hung up on I need just this thing? Why not just say I want a big knife and a little knife? That's what I'm going to carry.
Yeah.
You know?
I think for me, like, to break it down in honest feedback, like, if I'm going to go for a day trip or I want to travel really light even for a couple weeks, this is all I'll bring. But then if I'm going out, I still want to travel pretty light, but I know I'm going to do some big tasks, build a shelter, maybe a bow. I'll bring the primitive bush knife.
So you could chop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to go out for multi-months, I'll bring, you know, a big knife like this that has a little bit more aggressive chopping,
That way you're not as exhausted.
along
Yeah.
with a small knife.
Yeah.
So, you know, it just really comes down to your environment and how long you're going to be out. And there's different shapes and profiles. I think if you're looking at knives, I'm not trying to just advertise my knives here, but if you're trying,
That's what you have.
yeah, it's what I have. It's what I like. I design them for a reason. But when you're buying a knife, you want to look at the bevel of the knife. It's really critical. A nice long bevel.
So thick versus thin blades. What are the pros and cons?
I mean, to me, a thin blade is it's lighter weight. It means you're more likely to carry it. When we get a thick, heavy blade, you might like the way it feels in the hand. It might feel solid,
But it's
durable.
got so much weight to it.
You're gonna be less inclined to put it on your hip.
And I know a lot of people argue, oh, I got that thick blade so I won't break it. Just me personally, I'm going to say learn how to use the knife. And I don't want to sound like a total jerk about that, but what I mean by that is if you know how to use a knife properly, you shouldn't be breaking things. There's no reason why you need to stick your fillet knife in a tree and stand on it. If you find yourself in need of that, you have bigger problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a knife's not meant to be a pry bar.
Well, I mean, your big ones could be.
Like, potentially, yeah.
But if you need a pry bar, maybe buy a pry bar.
Yeah, absolutely. So you look at this knife, and it's got a fairly long bevel. That's something to pay attention to. Sometimes I think a poorly made bush knife might be a thicker blade knife that has a very acute bevel.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to get into the
It's
wood.
like cutting with a snowplow.
Exactly.
And you're just kind of like pressing stuff apart versus a good scanty type bevel or with a thin knife. You're just like, wow, this is so much easier. Where have you been on my life knife, you know?
Yeah.
So I fully understand. And some of the thicker ones, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at here, and I know I'm going back and forth, there's a time and a place for everything. What are you doing? If you're going to dig a trench and fight in World War II, maybe a thick knife is warranted, right? If you're going to fillet a fish, a thin knife is warranted. If you're going to build a shelter, maybe something halfway in between, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the characteristics of the knife, what specifically should people look for? Say you're going to go out and do primitive skills for a week, a month. What should you be looking for in your knife specifically?
We'll start with a small knife. I think.
And how come a small knife?
Well, I mean, just in terms of like explaining some of the things to look for in a smaller blade. The main thing is you definitely want it to feel very comfortable in your hand right off the get-go. Sometimes, and the part that hits right here against sort of that meat in between your thumb and your hand is very important. If a knife has a handle design where the handle cuts back and you're just against steel right there, for power carving, that's going to get really uncomfortable. Same thing with a pocket knife. If it has any sharp corners there, that's going to be very uncomfortable. So make sure that power carving edge is working for you.
Nice.
In terms of the shape, there's really all kinds of shapes that you can go with. I think this is kind of a good all-purpose shape right here. It's got the tip lines up with the end.
Why? I mentioned that. I want to ask because you pointed on it. That's one of my biggest complaints. When I get knives that have forward blades, I push on them and they rotate to the side. They have a lot of torsional movement. When I try to stab on something and spin to make a notch for a hand drill, as an example, if it's not in alignment, it's like spinning a crooked spindle. It goes wah 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 wah. Mm-hmm. So that's an excellent point. I didn't mean to shut you down, but when you've got the point either dead center or slightly offset so that you can still make a smooth twist, it is so nice because you gain so much more control over the blade.
Sure. Yeah, it definitely has advantage. Where this one, and I designed this blade too, and we see this one is offset, but you can also see it's a shorter blade.
It's kind of a hook type shape. There we go. So what would you use something like this for?
So the advantage to that is with a shorter blade, you still have a lot of length of the blade that's grabbing, slicing through a piece of wood if you're power carving. So the main advantage really is just the shortness. For all purpose, like this is a better profile.
It's like a modified sheep's point. The other one.
Yeah. And a blade like this too is like if you want to dig out a trench in a log, you could even carve out a bowl.
Or cutting through leather.
Out of leather, so it's a really good sort of pullback design. So it depends on your use and what you think you're actually going to do with it. On this big blade right here, I designed this with Condor, but I originally made this blade out of an old machete I found. This exact same shape and design.
That's it, right.
And it was
machete.
Machete. And this was one of my favorites for a while. I carried it for a long time. It's an excellent chopper.
And it's like, I expected this to be heavier. This is the first time I've touched this knife. And I grab it, it doesn't feel really heavy. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. And the thick girth is going to give me the strength, while making it thin to still cut through stuff. And for me at least, I film with a lot of people like Matt. I film with a lot of people that have way more experience than me, like Matt. They all like the thinner blades. But they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're not out there wailing on rocks and prying stuff, and they're not breaking their knives.
Right. And the thing with this profile, a lot of people might, I think it's a nice looking profile, but there's a lot more to this knife than it appears. Like for me this wide sweep and just the shape of it really gives a lot of power with chopping. And I also find that because of this once again, this wide front, I'm able to choke up on it and get all my hand there. If I want to do a lot of fine detail carving on the end, I can. I've actually skinned a lot of deer with this knife.
Yeah.
And people that skin deer, they
look anything with fish on it?
They fish everything.
Yeah.
Like this has been my all one-purpose knife in the wild. And people look at this and go, like, skin a deer with a big knife? What's that about? But it works, I
kind of like a ulu knife.
I can grab it, exactly. I've got a ulu, and also once I get the hide set out for dry scrape, I can use this as my dry scrape tool. I get a lot of leverage on this nice rounded edge.
You got a big handle to grip.
And then I'm just pulling it like this, and I clean the entire deer. So for a long-term survival situation, this is actually a really nice profile.
This is only a little bit light, a little bit heavier than this knife. That's what I want to illustrate. This is definitely a lighter knife. I'm not going to say that this Puko is, but I'm just like, I'm shocked at how light that is. And that makes me happy.
Yeah.
Ounces mean pound. What is it? Ounces are pounds. Pounds are pain.
Pounds are paid. Yeah.
Yeah, pounds are pain.
They can be.
So
Yeah.
be careful your weight. So. Okay.
So, yeah, and then I guess there's the discussion of stainless versus carbon.
Yes, stainless versus carbon. Dun
That-
dun dun.
That's the big one. So
Talk to me about it. What do you think? Stainless or carbon or both?
you know, once again, your environment's very dependent. If you spend a lot of time around salt water, around the ocean, I mean, stainless is amazing. It's a good way to go.
That just makes sense.
Yeah. If you're in a very dry environment, you're looking for absolute maximum performance, I think carbon's your better bet.
Let's talk a little bit about why too. Carbon compresses into diamond. It's one of the most structurally stable and strong elements out there. And when you add carbon to steel, it can take a hit and spring back. And it can stand that. True stainless steel is fairly brittle. So they have variants of stainless steel. We're going to call it mostly stainless steel is what you actually end up having.
Right.
And mostly stainless steel can mostly handle abuse, but more so handle salt. And it doesn't mess up.
Yeah.
So that's really just important to know those characteristics.
Yeah, and there's some knife manufacturers that blend the two together.
This is a perfect example. This is a Falk Knife A1 Pro that I sent to Osmo, who runs a YouTube channel called the Topakala, and he put this handle on it. So he basically turned a military knife into a Finnish puukko or liuku, which is the Sami people's survival chopper. And this knife is a laminate stainless steel with a higher carbon internal metal. So it's got that springiness, but because of the part of Europe that they're in that's very wet, they have that stainless ability. So the only place this is really going to stain, if it does, is right along the blade edge. And you have to look really close. You can kind of hopefully see, probably not. All right, there we go. Right along here, this internal part is a high carbon steel, and then the part that wraps around the outside is a stainless steel.
Nice. Yeah, that's a beast. That's a thick edge.
It's a thick edge, but I like the weight because. So if I'm going to chop something, I'm either going to bring a hatchet or I'm going to bring a heavy knife. The heavy knife I personally find better because it's lighter than a heavy hatchet, easier to carry.
Sure.
But I can also use that like a normal knife, so I can really. When you have one knife to do all the tasks, you have a Subaru Baja.
Yeah.
Is it a car? Is it a truck? No one knows. So,
Yeah.
but that's as close as I personally have been able to get to something I can chop with, that I can turn around and make a hearth board with, that I can turn around and skin with. It does a lot of things because it's that happy medium. It's not a giant machete. It's not really small. But as you can see, based on what I'm wearing, I have them both. This I used to gather some edibles earlier today with because it's easier to cut with. This I've been using all night long to chop firewood with and to make my steaks with earlier. So it's nice to have a good medium with both of these.
Yeah, it's pretty handle on that too.
It's gorgeous. This is a piece of art.
Yeah.
If you check out his channel, all the stuff he makes is gorgeous. This is African hardwood or African blackwood, I think what it was.
Is it Cocobolo? No.
It's like Cocobolo, but it's an African hardwood only called blackwood. And it just flares at the back so you can use it to chop.
Yeah.
It's a liuku with a Bowie blade on it. I know that's kind of blasphemy.
Yeah.
But
No.
it ended up being an experiment that turned out really well.
You can put a link on. You can put a link down below.
Oh, I will. I will put links down below.
This is actually sort of my version of a Leiuku. It's probably about half the weight, but
It's probably way less weight. Oh yeah, this is incredibly light. So a liuku, the Sami people are the indigenous people of northern Finland, western Russia, roughly. I'm getting there, and they're the people where all of our legends of Santa Claus and reindeer came from, and they do currently ride on reindeer herds up in the mountains, and they have a big knife called a liuku and a small knife called a puukko, and that's all they use. And they're living up there in the forest chopping trees down with these knives, right?
Yeah.
And their knives are a little bigger than this, but that's the blade shape that they use. And they're able to do they live off the reindeer while being in the mountains with just these knives. which says it's nice to have a hatchet, but you don't need it. You know, and you don't need it. And when you don't need it, sometimes it's nice not to have that extra weight. On this knife, this is beautiful. Thank you. So I like the handle shape. So one thing that's hard to impart with these knives, I can't show you what it feels like. All I can really tell you is it just fits right. And the other thing that I like is it flares in the back just a little bit. So as you start to get exhausted chopping things, your grip will loosen a little bit. Inertia will cause that blade to come forward. And since it flares, you're not going to lose it.
Yeah.
So you can still continue to chop, switch your hands, baton, whatever it is that you need to do without dropping your knife, stabbing yourself in the leg, you know, cutting that femoral artery open.
Yeah. So, custom knife versus, you know, say a bigger manufactured knife.
Yeah, that's an
my
exact
line
example.
right here.
This is, you know, this is a custom. This would cost you a lot of money if you bought this knife in a kit and then turned around and sent him and had him make it. So I'm very, very lucky to have this as a setup. This isn't going to cost you a quarter of the money.
Right.
Like, it's much cheaper. They compete with each other. They're absolutely on par. They're both pretty. They both have their attributes. They're both great knives. I would use either one of them interchangeably. But I like how light yours is. Yours is very, very,
I like
very
how
light.
pretty yours is.
It is. It is shiny. It does make me happy.
It's shiny.
I hold it and call it George. All right, guys. So that's just a little bit about what you should look for in a bushcrafter survival type knife. We're not saying that you can't use a folding knife. We're just saying maybe there's better options. We're not saying that you can't use a hatchet. We're just saying maybe there's better options. And I'm assuming, kind of basing this on the fact that we're in Utah. This isn't the boreal forest. This is high altitude desert. There's brush, hardwoods, softwoods, more choppable stuff. And a lot of the tasks that we're going to do are going to be oriented differently than the tasks that I would do, again, in the boreal forest. I go hang out with Morris Kohansky. I'm bringing a hatchet.
Yeah, good call.
All right, guys. If you're interested in any of these knives, okay, Matt has designed these, so you know their quality. I will leave links down in the bottom. If you're interested, I can't talk tonight. Interested. If you're interested in any of the knives made by Osmo, who runs the Topacala, I'll leave his channel and his link down below. Hit the subscribe button, and thank you for watching T-Jack Survival.